Entitled Karen, HOA member calls police over my garden gnomes. Moving to Willowbrook Estates seemed like the perfect fresh start. The manicured lawns, pristine sidewalks, and welcoming HOA guidelines promised a peaceful suburban paradise. I had recently sold my tech consulting firm and was looking forward to a quieter life, maybe some gardening, and finally having time to enjoy the finer things. The modest colonial I purchased sat on a corner lot with excellent southern exposure, perfect for the herb garden I had been planning. My first addition to the property was 7 handcrafted garden gnomes from a local artisan fair. These were not typical plastic lawn ornaments. Each one was carefully carved from sustainably sourced cedar and hand-painted with intricate details. I positioned them thoughtfully throughout my front garden beds, creating charming little vignettes among the lavender and rosemary. The craftsmanship was exquisite, and several neighbors stopped by during my first week to compliment the whimsical touch they brought to the neighborhood. That is, until I met Karen Hendricks. Karen lived in the imposing 2-story brick house directly across the street and served as president of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. She introduced herself on a Tuesday morning while I was watering my herb seedlings, marching across the street with a clipboard in hand and an expression that could have curdled milk. "Good morning. I am Karen Hendricks, HOA president for this community. I need to discuss some concerns about your recent landscaping choices." I smiled politely and extended my hand. "Nice to meet you, Karen. I am delighted to be part of such a beautiful neighborhood. What concerns do you have?" Karen ignored my outstretched hand and consulted her clipboard with theatrical importance. Article 7, Section 3, Subsection B of our community guidelines clearly states that all lawn ornaments must be approved by the Architectural Review Committee before installation. Your garden gnomes violate this policy. I glanced at my carefully placed gnomes, each no taller than 8 inches and perfectly integrated into the landscaping design. I was not aware of that requirement. Could you provide me with the approval form? I would be happy to submit it. The approval process takes 6 to 8 weeks, and there is a $50 administrative fee per item. Until approval is granted, those gnomes must be removed immediately. Karen tapped her pen against the clipboard with sharp, staccato clicks. The reasonable approach seemed best. Of course, I understand the importance of maintaining community standards. However, given that the gnomes are handcrafted art pieces that complement the garden design, perhaps we could expedite the process? I would be willing to pay any additional fees. Karen's eyes narrowed. Rules are rules. No exceptions. I expect those eyesores removed by tomorrow evening, or the association will be forced to take action. With that pronouncement, she spun on her heel and stalked back across the street. I spent the evening reviewing the HOA guidelines I had received at closing. The document was a labyrinthine maze of regulations covering everything from mailbox height to acceptable paint colors, but I noticed something interesting. While Section 7.3b did indeed require approval for lawn ornaments, the definition specifically excluded gardening and landscaping elements integral to plant cultivation and garden design. My gnomes were clearly positioned as functional garden elements, not decorative lawn ornaments. The next morning, I called the HOA management company to clarify the policy interpretation. The representative, a pleasant woman named Sandra, agreed that my gnomes appeared to fall under the gardening exemption based on my description. She offered to send Karen an official interpretation memo, which I gladly accepted. That afternoon, Karen appeared at my front door, clutching a printed email and vibrating with indignation. "You went behind my back to the management company. Those gnomes are staying put, are they not?" I simply sought clarification on the policy interpretation. According to the management company, garden elements that serve a landscaping function are exempt from the lawn ornament restrictions. I do not care what Sandra thinks she knows. I am the president of this association, and I determine what violates our standards. Those gnomes are going, one way or another. Over the following weeks, Karen launched an increasingly aggressive campaign against my garden gnomes. She submitted formal complaints to the management company, photographed my front yard from various angles, and began leaving passive-aggressive notes in my mailbox. The notes started relatively mild, reminder about community standards, but quickly escalated to more threatening language. Persistent violations will result in legal action and fines. I maintained my professional demeanor and continued following proper channels. I submitted the formal approval application with detailed photographs and measurements. paid the administrative fees for all 7 gnomes, and even included letters from 3 landscaping professionals attesting to their function as integral garden elements. The Architectural Review Committee, consisting of 3 reasonable neighbors, unanimously approved my application within 2 weeks. Karen was not pleased. This approval is invalid. I was not properly consulted as HOA president. I am overruling this decision immediately. She waved the approval letter in my face during another surprise visit. Karen, the approval process followed all established procedures. The Architectural Review Committee has full authority to make these decisions according to the bylaws. We shall see about that. Her smile was pure malice. I have connections throughout this county. Your little gnomes will be gone, and you will regret challenging my authority. The first police visit happened on a quiet Sunday morning. I was enjoying coffee on my front porch when Officer Martinez pulled into my driveway. Karen had called 911 to report a noise disturbance, claiming my sprinkler system was violating municipal quiet hours. Officer Martinez examined my clearly silent sprinkler system and apologized for the frivolous call, noting that Karen had made several similar reports throughout the neighborhood in recent months. The second police visit occurred 3 days later. This time, Karen had reported suspicious activity, claiming I was running an illegal business from my home because UPS had delivered several packages. Officer Johnson, who seemed familiar with Karen's pattern of complaints, politely examined the clearly personal deliveries and departed with another apology. By the 4th police visit, I recognized a pattern. Karen was systematically harassing me through false police reports, hoping to pressure me into removing my gnomes through sheer frustration. Each report was technically legal but completely frivolous, designed to waste my time and create a paper trail she could point to as evidence of neighborhood problems. During this period, I began paying closer attention to Karen's own property and HOA compliance. My background in systems analysis had taught me to observe patterns and identify inconsistencies, skills that proved invaluable in this situation. What I discovered was fascinating. Karen's immaculate front lawn featured several interesting elements that had somehow escaped Architectural Review Committee scrutiny. Her mailbox, while beautifully designed, exceeded the maximum height restrictions by approximately 3 inches. The decorative shutters on her home were painted in a custom color that did not appear on the approved palette. Most intriguingly, her backyard contained an extensive koi pond installation completed without any permits or HOA approval. But the real discovery came when I researched property records at the county courthouse. During my years in tech consulting, I had developed relationships with various professionals, including a few attorneys who specialized in real estate and municipal law. My friend David Chen had mentioned that property research could reveal interesting information about HOA violations and compliance issues. What I found exceeded my expectations. Karen's property had been cited by the county for illegal modifications to her koi pond that violated setback requirements and water management regulations. The citations had been issued 8 months earlier, but Karen had apparently used her HOA connections to delay enforcement action. More importantly, the pond violated 3 separate sections of our own HOA guidelines regarding water features, landscaping modifications, and architectural approval requirements. Armed with this information, I had several options. I could file counter-complaints about Karen's violations, report her misconduct to the HOA management company, or take a more direct approach. However, my consulting background had taught me that the most effective solutions often involved leveraging existing systems rather than fighting them directly. I spent the next week researching municipal codes, zoning regulations, and property law. My friend David proved invaluable during this process, helping me understand the legal landscape and identify potential opportunities. What we discovered was a fascinating loophole in the county's cultural preservation ordinances. Willowbrook County had recently passed legislation encouraging public art installations and cultural preservation projects. Property owners could apply for special cultural designation status for qualified art installations, which would provide protection under county ordinances and override local HOA restrictions. The application process required documentation of artistic merit, cultural significance, and community benefit. My handcrafted garden gnomes, as it turned out, represented a perfect case study in folk art preservation. The artisan who created them, Wilhelm Baumeister, was a third-generation woodcarver whose family had emigrated from Germany in the early 1900s. His gnomes followed traditional European garden folklore and employed techniques passed down through 4 generations of craftsmen. With David's help, I prepared a comprehensive application for cultural preservation status. The documentation included historical research on Germanic garden traditions, artistic analysis from local art professors, and community impact statements from neighbors who appreciated the cultural elements my gnomes brought to the neighborhood. I also commissioned Wilhelm to create 3 additional gnomes, expanding the collection to represent a more complete folkloric narrative. The County Cultural Board approved my application unanimously. Meanwhile, Karen had escalated her harassment campaign. She organized a neighborhood petition demanding my gnome's removal, though she managed to collect only 6 signatures from a community of over 40 homes. She submitted formal complaints to code enforcement, the county health department, and even the state environmental protection agency, all of which found no violations. Her most aggressive move came when she convinced 2 other HOA board members to call an emergency meeting specifically to address my garden gnomes. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday evening, with Karen clearly expecting to railroad me through intimidation and procedural manipulation. I arrived at the community center that evening with a briefcase full of documentation and David at my side as legal counsel. Karen had arranged the seating to place herself at the head of the table with her 2 allies flanking her, while folding chairs for residents were positioned in neat rows facing their authority. This emergency meeting is called to address the ongoing violation of community standards by the garden gnome installation at 412 Maple Street, Karen announced with ceremonial gravity. Despite repeated warnings and community concerns, the homeowner has refused to comply with HOA regulations. I stood slowly, placing my briefcase on the table with deliberate calm. Before we proceed, I would like to present some new information that may affect this discussion. Karen waved dismissively. The time for discussion has passed. We are here to vote on enforcement action and potential fines. I believe the board will want to review these county documents before taking any action. I opened my briefcase and placed the Cultural Preservation Certificate on the table. As of last Friday, my garden gnome installation has been granted official cultural preservation status by Willowbrook County. This designation provides protection under County Ordinance 77-4, which supersedes local HOA authority regarding qualified cultural installations. The room fell silent. Karen snatched the certificate and examined it with growing alarm. This is impossible. You cannot just declare lawn ornaments as cultural artifacts. David cleared his throat. The County Cultural Board reviewed extensive documentation regarding the historical and artistic significance of traditional Germanic garden folklore as represented in Mr. Baumeister's handcrafted collection. The designation is legally binding and provides full protection under state cultural preservation statutes. Karen's face had progressed through several shades of red. We will fight this in court. The HOA has rights. Actually, I said, retrieving another document from my briefcase. That brings up an interesting point about HOA enforcement authority. While researching county regulations, I discovered some fascinating information about violation procedures and board member liability. I placed photographs of Karen's property violations on the table. These images document multiple HOA violations at your property, Karen, including an unpermitted koi pond, non-compliant mailbox height, and unauthorized paint colors. According to HOA bylaws, board members who knowingly violate community standards while selectively enforcing rules against other residents can be held personally liable for damages and removed from their positions. Karen's eyes darted between the photographs and the cultural preservation certificate. Those are minor technicalities. Nothing like your ridiculous gnome collection. The county does not consider them technicalities. David consulted his notes. The koi pond violations carry potential fines of up to $5,000, and the county has been waiting 8 months for compliance. Interestingly, the delay appears to be related to your position on the HOA board, which could constitute abuse of authority under municipal code. I smiled pleasantly. But that is not the most interesting part of our research. I placed the final document on the table. Willowbrook County recently expanded their cultural preservation program to include community-wide designations. Based on the success of individual applications like mine, property owners can now petition for neighborhood cultural district status, which would provide enhanced protection for folk art, traditional crafts, and cultural installations throughout the designated area. Karen stared at the petition form, her face draining of color as she read the title, Application for Willowbrook Estates Cultural Heritage District Designation. I have been in touch with several neighbors who are interested in participating. I continued conversationally. The Johnsons want to install a traditional Mexican tile fountain. The Kowalskis plan to display their Polish pottery collection in their front garden. The Patel family has beautiful traditional Indian sculptures they have been hesitant to display due to HOA restrictions. Once the district designation is approved, which should take approximately 6 weeks, all participating properties will be exempt from standard HOA architectural review requirements for qualified cultural installations. Residents will be free to express their heritage through traditional art, crafts, and cultural elements without interference from local homeowner associations. Karen's mouth opened and closed soundlessly as the full implications sank in. Her entire power structure, built on petty enforcement of arbitrary rules, would be completely neutered. Worse, her own property violations would remain fully subject to county enforcement while everyone else gained protection for their cultural expressions. The County Cultural Board is particularly excited about this application, David added helpfully. They view Willowbrook Estates as a model community for cultural preservation and neighborhood heritage celebration. Your Gnome collection will be featured prominently in their case study. Karen looked around the room at her fellow board members, both of whom were staring at the documents with growing comprehension. Her carefully orchestrated power play had backfired spectacularly, transforming her personal vendetta against my garden gnomes into the catalyst for a community-wide liberation from her authority. The moment of realization hit her like a physical blow. She had not just lost the battle over my 7 small garden gnomes. She had inadvertently triggered a complete systematic dismantling of the petty tyranny she had spent years constructing, and there was absolutely nothing she could do to stop it.